First of all, thank you for giving this opportunity so that I can share some of my knowledge with all the plant lovers. And if you look at um, Patriji's the mottos, I remember three things: meditation, plant life, and then what else? The three important things. And the plant life is one of the major aspects he's emphasizing. And when Divyaji asked me to talk about plant life, I told her, look, I'll wait until towards the end of the program because so many people will be talking about plants, and I want to cover something which they haven't covered during the process. So I've been waiting, and I've seen lots of masters talking about plants in various ways. And the one to remember is the lotus plant. And many people talked about herbal medicines and so many aspects. So now I'm going to focus my talk on some of the science and the knowledge behind plants, and with the idea of using this knowledge in application, practical application, like herbal medicine, how to grow plants, how to look after your garden plants as the second stage, maybe when the time permits, or maybe some other time to organize that. Practical aspects are secondary, and the knowledge base is the first one. And so that's why I'm going to focus on some of the fundamental issues about the plants. Let me see. Okay. So what we have focused so far, 94 sessions, majority of the talks were focused on mind, body, soul, and controlling our mind through meditation. So I just want to take a little bit bigger picture. The mind is only very small. Poor mind is very small here, and it is surrounded by so many other factors which will dictate how the mind should behave. For example, the mind, we have ourselves, within the mind itself, we have two versions. Shall I do this? Shall I not do that? Sumati and Kumati. Then we have the family, friends, workmates, society, and the place where we live, and the surrounding environment, and the earth itself, and the associated animals. So all of them are interacting. All of them are influencing the way the mind thinks, the way we behave. But most of our talks have been really focused on the mind, how to control it. And amongst all these things, the plants play a very important role, and many of us may not recognize and register that. That's the one which I'm going to emphasize on this talk. So the plants have been taken for granted, and they play a very important role in bringing all these things together for our mind to work nicely. And most importantly, our mind, every particle in our body is going to be influenced by the magnetic force, right? Because the planet Earth is revolving around without any base, and that is held in the space by the magnetic forces. So all those forces act upon us, every one of us, and they influence the way we behave, the way we react, the way we feel. So out of which the plant is the very, very important component. And let's talk about the plant. And what is a plant? Plant is really can be defined as a living organism which can synthesize its own food. So there are so many living things, living and dead things on this planet. And the dead things include the rocks, metals. Living is the one where there is a bit of a biological activity happening. So the plant is the one this plant is the only the living organism on this planet which can synthesize its own food. That is why it acts as a founding block, means it is the one which creates the energy for all other living organisms to survive. Except a small group, the majority of the living organisms rely upon this plant because this is the one which is synthesizing the energy. Some engineers call the power plants or factories as plant. They're not real plants. So they're using the concept of a real plant and they're naming the energy generator as the power plant. So that's what they call it. So the real plant is the one which can synthesize its own energy, or the food is the real plant. Okay, how does it synthesize its food? Energy comes from the sun, but that energy can't be used directly by other living organisms. For example, when you go out into a bright sunlight and we receive about 2000 micro units of energy, and that energy can't be used by the living organisms. That has to be converted into chemical energy. So the plants have the capacity to convert that solar energy into chemical energy. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on when we talk about the photosynthesis. And that energy is going to be utilized by the animals, then some other animals, the higher level animals, then again further higher animals. Then once they finish their life, goes into the ground and the microbes use those energies. So it's the starting point, the opening door is the plant which creates energy without which none of these organisms can survive on this planet. So that's one thing I wanted to remember, because majority of the people take it for granted because the plants are found everywhere, but they are the building blocks for whatever happens on this planet. And most importantly, it allows the humans to be on top of the food web. I will tell you why, right? Every one of us need certain amount of energy. And if we have to rely upon the plants, especially the leaves, to get the amount of energy, 8,000 calories or something like that, and about 70 grams of protein, and using the leaves, and we had to eat about 10 kilos of leaves per day. To get the fresh leaves, 10 kilos, we should be grazing just like animals, and then we wouldn't have had any time to do any creative work. But the plants, they are very smart. They collect the energy, convert the solar energy into the chemical energy, and put those energies into the fruits, seeds, and in a very enriched form. So we human beings consume the seeds and the fruits, which are really enriched, and there we spend only about an hour or so in eating. The rest of the time we spend on the creative activities. If the plants, imagine just for 1 second, plants produce only leaves, no fruits, no seeds, what would be the life for the humans? There is no time for us to do anything at all. Always eating grass, just like the other animals. So plant is the one which is really responsible for harvesting that energy from the solar system, converting that into chemical energy like sugar, and that sugar converts into protein and then and other carbohydrates which we rely upon. So plants are the building blocks. And what else they do? They also release oxygen, the second aspect. So whatever the contaminated gas we produce, that is carbon dioxide, acts as the basis for the plants, and they make use of that carbon dioxide, and in that process, energy conversion process, they produce the oxygen. So energy is one aspect. Releasing the oxygen is another aspect which will make the other animals to survive on this planet. And also, they bind the soil from soil erosion. So if you don't have the plants, you can see that during a rainy season, lots of soil being eroded. If that happens year after year for millions of years, then we wouldn't have any soil left on this planet. No soil means no plant. No plant means no animal. No animal means not even the human beings. So then this planet becomes really bare like in other planets. So plants are the most important, the elements in providing, sustaining the life on this planet. And also the plant provides several other things. So what else they do? What is the role of the plants? How do they function? How do they get their energy? How do they get their water? How do they get their minerals from the soil? First of all, they are the very active plants, means active living organisms. And although they stay put at one place, they don't move around like animals. They never sleep. Daytime, they are synthesizing the carbohydrates by converting the solar energy into chemical energy. Nighttime, they take up all the nutrients and minerals from the roots and pumping that, the water and the nutrients to the trunk and also the leaves. And most importantly, the nutrients are buried 1 to 10 meters below the ground, and the plants take up little by little at a time, transport those nutrients to the leaves, and the leaves drop, go back into the soil and enriching the topsoil. That topsoil will make other plants grow better. The animals and the microbes survive in the topsoil, and as a result, the plants are responsible for making sure that the microbes and the topsoil is kept enriched with the nutrients by pulling out all those nutrients from the rocks into the soil. And also, they alter the hydrology of the landscape, means when it rains, they will facilitate movement of that water into the soil. And that way, the water is stored in the subsoil for longer time. If not, then the water will run away and then the land will become barren. So plants help in the hydrology of the landscape. So these are the things, just the cross section of all the things what the plant do. It doesn't sleep. It supports many insects, animals, then the microbes and the spiders, the birds. So many variety of the living organisms take shelter on those plants. So without those plants, and that diversity wouldn't really exist. And they're also very attractive. Just imagine going to a desert like a Rajasthan desert. You see nothing but the sand, 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 sand everywhere. If you live there for about 1 or 2 days, you will realize the importance of the plants because not many plants grow in those places. So that's why the humans mimic or create that aesthetic appearance by dressing up very, very decorative, colorful dresses, clothes, and the jewelry like that to make their life more pleasant. But other places where we find the plants, if you go to Holland, you will see lots of the flowers, and the entire area is very, very picturesque. And why? Because we have the plants which can produce that aesthetic appearance. And so that is the importance of the plants. They are the building blocks. They are equivalent to mothers. If you talk about the human race, mother is the creator of life. And if you talk about the environment or the planet, the plants are the creator of the life on this planet. So let's remember one thing at least. So just like in the human beings, we call mother as the creator. Similarly, extending the same concept to the planet, the plants are the creator of life on this planet. The next question is, where do we find them? So we find plants everywhere. Everywhere we go on this planet, but other planets may not support that. And we find plants in the ocean. They're called ocean plants. We find plants in the water bodies. They're called wetlands. And the water plants. We find plants on the rocks, virtual rocks, yes. And we find on the plants growing on the buildings, on the walls. But majority of the plants grow in the soil where there is a supply of the nutrients, there's supply of water, and so that's where majority of the plants grow. And the plants can grow on top of other plants without any soil, and they're called parasites. So this is where the plants are found. You can find them everywhere, and that's why we have taken it for granted that the plants are just nothing, and that's why we don't give much importance unless they're really required. And look at the scenario. In Australia, every household spends quite a lot of money in bringing the plants, planting them, and many of them die because they don't look after them very well, but still maintain a picturesque sort of environment like this. And especially the rich people go into the real forest, cut it open, use that area as their living space because they find a lot of energy flowing in there, clean energy, the quiet environment, and so forth. So plants are really sought after, especially the rich people. The next one. So how big the plant can grow? Plants can grow up to 500 feet. A single plant tree can grow up to 500 feet tall, and they can be very, very big, as you can see here, the diameter and the height, and they can be very, very tiny. So this plant is as good as this plant in terms of the DNA composition. The DNA of this plant, the buckwheat and duckweed, is similar to DNA of this, and this one has got, and so they can range in size from a tiny, the 1 to 1 inch or less than 1 inch size to 500 feet. So they can range in size. And plants are also used in, means they naturally found in various environments, different types of soils. And but majority of the plants we grow in as a plantation for paper production, timber, and the fruit production, mango orchards, citrus orchards, pine forest, and then hardwood timber, teak, the forest. So they're either found in the natural habitat or they're planted by the humans for production. The next question is, where did they come from? When did they arrive on this planet? Why do we have so many species of plants? Right? That is the question. So where did they come from? Right, let's look at that. If we go back 4,000 million years ago, there was no land, there was no water. It's all molten lava like this. During that, the heating that took place in that lava, there was some chemical reaction taking place and a DNA molecule was produced. That DNA molecule produced a single cell, a bacterial type of cell. And that cell started evolving into different life form. And many of the evolutionary processes didn't succeed and they stopped. But there are only 5 or 6 branches survived. One of that is the bacteria. That is one group which survived. The primitive bacteria evolved into archaebacteria. This group, they don't require any energy. They rely upon the chemical energy from the reaction. And then another branch evolved into plants, another one into the fungi, another one into the animals, and then the algae. So if you remember the evolutionary process, remember a celery plant with 5 branches, 5 to 6 branches, and the life came from a single cell, and then it branched out into 5 groups, and a plant is one of them, right? So the plants came here in the celery system. That's how they evolved, some about 3,000 million years ago. So now we have distinct groups. We call all the living organisms on this planet, put them into 6 boxes. One is the plant, fungi, and the algae, then bacteria, and animals. So these are the only living organisms. We group them into different class and the groups, and they all were on the origin. The origin of those living organisms is a single cell, happened several million years ago. So how did the life start? Originally, they were all in water, tiny algae and diatoms. Then they became some of the charophytes, means they are the water plants. Then tiny mosses were produced from these ones. So the single cell produced the plant-like structure in water, and then became the mosses, then the xylophytes, then the ferns, then the gymnosperms, like the pines were produced, and finally the flowering plants evolved. So all this process took nearly about 3,000 million years, but we saw the plants, the dinosaur plants, and the plants which produce the flowers. So these plants started about 250 million years ago, whereas the flowering plants came on board in the last 100 million years. So these plants have been there for nearly 100 million years. So that's the origin. So the The plants came from a single cell from the wet and the aquatic environment into dry and terrestrial environment. Originally, they didn't have any flowers. In the last 60 million years, they've evolved into producing flowering plants, giving us all the luxury of seeds, fruits, and aesthetic appearance. So, with that process, and now we think that we are the top of the food web, and that happened because of the evolution of the plants and how they adapted. So just to give you an example, how many plants are there? So there are about 350,000 plants on this planet, and then that's divided between different countries. Australia alone has got 25,000 species. And then one of the states, Queensland, has got 10,000 species. And then just a small region has got 3,000. And then a city, about 1,000 species. And a small campus, the university campus, will have 500 to 800 species. So that is how the plant diversity is extremely important. That's how they can survive in any environment and any condition, and because of that diversity. If you happen to go into your garden, try to look for different types of plants. I'm sure you will find at least 20 different varieties. In a small garden, you'll find about 20 different varieties. The next question is a very important aspect. I want you to take home this particular aspect because everybody in this group, they're talking about herbal plants, herbal medicines and all. Very, very important aspect you need to remember is when somebody tells you about a herbal plant, oh, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is fine because it's very popular. Many other herbal plants people don't know. Using the common name is going to be sometimes misleading. So that's why I want you to remember whenever somebody tells you about a particular plant, ask them for a common name. For example, in this case, tomato is a common name. Then also ask them for botanical name because botanically each plant will have only one name. No matter which country you go, that plant will have only one name. Whether it's in Russia, US, India, it must have only one name. Whereas common names could be thousands. And that's why when you're talking about the herbal plants or anything about the plants, try to quiz that person who is giving that information. What is the common name? What is the botanical name? Botanical name will have two components, just like human beings, Homo sapiens. Just like that, the plant name has got the two components, and they're not two separate ones. It's together. Solanum, for example, tomato is called as Solanum lycopersicum. Go to any part of the world and ask for the Solanum lycopersicum. You can't go wrong. And also, the third one is the added benefit. Ask for which family do they belong. The reason being, the moment you find out which family it belongs, you get lots of information. Why? Some people are allergic to certain plants. And if this particular medicinal plant belongs to that family to which you are allergic or creating some reaction in your body, you immediately know that whether that medicinal plant is good for you or not. So asking for a common name is okay. And then you must ask for a scientific name. And if possible, you find out which family it belongs. That way you can suss out whether that plant is suitable for you or not. So that three important points I want you to remember. whenever you're talking about the herbal plant, anything like that. So that's the plant taxonomy, right? So I'm just giving you an example. People didn't follow this. In 1990, about 10,000 Belgian people became sick and they had to be operated. Why? They were supposed to be taking this particular plant, and somehow the pharmacist dispensed, or the herbalist collected the leaves from the another plant here, which looks like this. And then people had the cancer, 10,000 people, and because this plant goes into the body, creates mutation and damages the liver, whereas this one is the medicinal plant. So unknowingly, people were taking the poisonous plant in the name of a medicinal plant. So that is why it is extremely important to know what you consume. And going by the common name sometimes is very misleading. Going by the just a shape, it's misleading. Several plants which are consumed in India as medicinal plants or the herbal plants are the weeds or the poisonous plants in Australia or in the US. So that's why when you're consuming a new plant, you must be very careful and find out exactly the botanical name, whether it has got any toxic effects, even if it looks like exactly the one you're used to back home. Same as same is the case with the mushrooms. You can't eat mushrooms, whatever you pick. You must have authenticity. Just like that, the plants we consume must have authenticity. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble. And what's the best way you can do to see the authenticity? Take a piece of a sample which you are planning to consume or grow in your garden, send it to the local herbarium like this, and they will identify and give you the name, and later on you can decide whether to consume that plant or not. So this is the way we can deal with those plants in terms of the botanical. So that's about the plants. So there plants are lots of plants are there. They're everywhere in your backyard. At least you'll find 20 of them. And to deal with them is to know their botanical name, scientific name, common name, and if possible, the family. So let's talk about how are we going with the time? Shishmaji, how are we going with the time?
Um, so we are little bit over, Ashwathji.
All right.
Yeah, if we can wrap up in 5 minutes, if
All
it's
right.
possible.
Okay. That's why I just wanted to check with you. So there is again what is happening. The plants produce the sugar from the sunlight, and they take up a lot of water. Each tree will take up pump about 200 liters of water every day. And the question is, and they also accumulate, transport lots of minerals, calcium, magnesium, and all these nutrients. And how does this happen? Right? That's again plant physiology. I won't go into the details. Think about it. Just when you look at a plant, and also people are talking about in this group, hugging the tree, walking on the grass barefoot. And you should remember what the plant is and what's going on inside. So when you look at a tree, you assume that you are an X-ray machine going through the tree and visualize what's going inside the trunk. So there's a lot of respiration happening, photosynthesis happening, water is being pumped, minerals are taken up. So when you hug the tree and you can feel the charges going up through the trunk, and that is the energy. Especially there is one tree called lemon scented gum. It's a eucalypt tree. It's very smooth. The leaves smell very nice. And if you hug the tree, you feel so nice, and because it produces a lot of energy. And that's how some people get lots of energy when they walk into the bush, when they take a walk into the garden, when they work in the garden, they re-energize by dealing with the plant, going back into the plant. So with that, I will conclude, and I'm happy to take some questions. I know that there'll be lots of questions there. And so if there is an opportunity, then I will give the practical experience, application of all these principles which we talk, and later on when there is an opportunity.